Hi, everybody. Welcome to our webinar today. My name is Janita Swenson with Heart of the Customer. We are going to be focusing on building a better dashboard. Just letting you know that this will be recorded, so it will remain on LinkedIn for anyone who would like to review the replay later or share it off with your friends after the webinar is done. And I'll be here as the facilitator of the Q&A at the end of this webinar. So if you have any questions, please feel free to put that in our Q&A here on LinkedIn, and we'll facilitate that towards the end of the webinar. So please post any questions that you have and so that we can address them. I'd like to announce our today's speaker. We have Jim Tincher here, who's CAO of Heart of the Customer, and Shaughn Houston, who's the Director of CX at Esri Canada. Jim, I'll hand it off to you to give yourself an introduction.
All right. Thanks, Janita. Yes, I'm founder and CEO at Heart of the Customer and really overall CX geek. I was the second Certified Customer Experience Professional, CCXP. I'm on the board of the CXPA and the author of 2 books, How Hard Is It to Be Your Customer? Using Journey Mapping to Drive Customer-Focused Change. And what led me today is Do B2B Better, Drive Growth Through Game-Changing Experience, where I really got a better understanding about the importance of data in great customer experience programs. On that journey, I ran across Shaughn, a great leader, met him a few times in person as well as interviewed him. Let's turn it over. Shaughn, tell us about yourself.
Yes, I'm Shaughn. I'm from Esri Canada. I've been in the CX business well before it was even called CX. I've been in customer support, tech support for 30 plus years. Started out as a tech support person. The last 25 years, I've been running customer teams from that side, many different types of customer engagement. The last 15 years, I've been at Esri Canada, which 3 years ago, I was asked to start up a formal CX program for us in a dual type role as I hired my replacement from an operations side. And then 2 years ago, we formally started a CX department. So we're 2 years into this. It's our sole focus, and I look forward to talking more about this. I was a little surprised when Jim asked for us to talk because I feel we're still on the journey, trying to find our way along in some of these areas. So I'll pass it back to you, Jim.
Excellent. I'm going to begin with a little bit of a background from our research in the book, and then we're going to turn it over to Shaughn for most of the time today. So let's get into it. And when I built the book, Do B2B Better, I ran across 4 actions of a change maker. Now, quick background. A change maker is a CX leader or a program who can prove that the work they're doing is leading to business outcomes, specifically customers who want to spend more with you, stay longer, and interact in ways less expensive to serve. My research says that's 23% of companies. Customer Think says it's 25%. Exim Institute says 25%. Qualtrics's Value Analysis Group says 25%. So we disagree by 2%, but pretty much everybody agrees that only about 1 in 4 can really show the financial impact of the work they're doing. Now we go into how do they do it. There were 4 actions. First of all, connecting to financial outcomes, showing that from customer experience, there's higher order velocity, for example, or improved net revenue retention, decreased cost of spending. Secondly, was measure an emotional North Star. And typically, emotions are the best predictor of those financial outcomes. Third, where we'll be spending a lot of time today, is to measure the journey, not through surveys, but from the customer ecosystem data, the behavioral and operational data that shows what's really happening in the journey. And lastly, they use deliberate change management. And I love this quote from Bill from my book, where data is executives' love language. In fact, if I could only ask one question to know if you were a change maker or a hopeful is a 3 out of 4 that hope their work matters, it would be, tell me about your data, which is what we're going to be hearing from Shaughn today. Now, on that work, I identified the CX loyalty flywheel, which is that when you invest in customer experience, well, of course, that experience gets better, no shock. Customers become more emotionally engaged, they buy more, stay longer, and then the business gets better, which surprised nobody. We all believe in this model. But what's different is what you'll notice in the boxes surrounding it is how change makers measure the journey. Yes, they look at transactional surveys, but they also look at operational and behavioral data to see how the journey changed based on the improvements. They measure actual emotions, and they look at behavioral and financial data, all leading to, for example, improved customer lifetime value, net revenue retention, or annual recurring revenue. And so you can find out much more about this in the book. Now, a quick primer, there's 5 types of data you want to be thinking about as you build your dashboards and as you think about the customer experience. Of course, sentiment, the CX data. There's also descriptive data. So, for example, your segments, the type of role an individual has, the type of products customer buying, but data that describes who this customer is, both as a company and an individual. We're going to spend more time on behavioral and operational data. Behavioral data is what customers do. It's really a form of voice of the customer. So, for example, are they using your digital tools or analog? Are they opening complaints? Are they ordering within lead times? Operational data is what you do. How long it takes to get back to them on a complaint, average hold time, on-time delivery, and then the financial outcome. Now, you want to be familiar with all 5, but really, we talk dashboarding. The dashboarding gold is the behavioral, the operational data. So that's what we want to focus on here, is really understanding that data and how that helps you to really tell a better story. And I'm going to leave this section, the overview, with just an example of Dow's dashboard that I reported in the book. Now, I'm not going to show you the real data, of course, but when they showed their dashboard, you can see, first of all, they don't measure Net Promoter Score. They measure CXI, the Customer Experience Index, which is effectiveness, ease, and enjoyability. And we can have a whole webinar on that. But you notice right next to that are 2 pieces of operational data. On-time delivery, pretty self-explanatory, and get it right. Not just on time, but right product, no flaws. They then have their overall priorities. This is from 2020, as you can see, as well as some other pieces of sentiment score on the bottom to show how they're doing. And this is what really turned me on to the importance of a great dashboard. Because when I was talking with the CX team, I was shadowing there when they showed this dashboard to me. They said that they had 1,000 licenses for their dashboard, and they ran out of licenses. They had to start preventing lower level executives from viewing the dashboard because they only had 1,000 to work with. And that's a problem I want everybody on this webinar to have. And Shaughn's going to help us think through how we get there. Now, it's putting a little bit too much burden on you, Shaughnn, perhaps, but let's go ahead and turn to Shaughnn. And as he moves into it, let's start. Shaughnn, tell us a little bit about you and Esri Canada and what CX is all about at Esri Canada.
Yeah, for us, we are a software and services company, and we specialize in geographic information systems. So it basically, visualization is very important, like from our customer perspective, and that's where our product allows you to capture, store, and analyze and present the data, but it's done in a spatial manner. So we've kind of been programmed to try and figure out, how do we look at data and how do we properly represent that data itself. Now, we do use our own product for our survey management itself. It's not necessarily fully designed for that, but it has given us kind of more data to kind of bring into this kind of dashboard side. My team, and Esri is a little bit of a different model in the fact that it's not, Esri headquarters is in the US, and then there's offices around the world. They're independently owned companies within each one of the countries that is the exclusive distributor of the Esri product. So we have access to some data, but the usage type data and things like that, we don't have access to everything. So we had to get a little bit creative from that side to try and figure out how and what we wanted to measure. We have a very small team. So as I stated, we started a couple of years ago. We hired 2 foundational resources that are phenomenal. We have a CX generalist, and we have a voice of the customer person. So they basically both kind of have their own data that they're collecting. And that somewhat brought us to the point of trying, how do we bring this data together and try and figure out how we do things. We're a small company. I say small, it's not, we're 500-600 people. And we've always really surveyed our customers. Like, we've always collected that data. The transactional survey has a closed the loop process, but it just siloed. The actual larger annual surveys, they would be like a project that we would do the survey, get the results, have a few things to do, and then we'd wait till next year until we kind of did it. So we were trying to figure out how we went kind of further and started to look at our business systems to see what our customers were actually doing, not just what our customers were saying. So we went through this exercise of trying to figure out, our financial data is in the ERP, which is SAP. We have our CRM data in Salesforce, and trying to figure out how do we best find that kind of behavioral data and operational data, and trying to find the right kind of ecosystem to put it in, because our whole goal was trying to ensure that we wanted to figure out what the key indicators were and have a central lens that people could look at within, and we displayed in Salesforce, that they can then find opportunities and action from that side. For us, it was a bit of a journey that we went through. Like, we started out the journey trying to figure out, okay, let's research, let's do lots of research. And suddenly we got 75 things we want to measure. Let's kind of all go out, and we said, whoa, okay, let's kind of take a bit of a crawl, walk, run approach to this. So we actually narrowed it down to 13 things that we had easy access to the data. We didn't need data scientists, or we didn't need people helping us out, that we could kind of manage ourselves. And we did some proof of concepts, worked on our calculations to kind of come to this kind of positive, neutral, negative kind of ranking from a customer side. So I'll take a break there, Jim, allow you to ask any questions from that front.
Sure. And so, of course, when we first started talking about this was for a different project. We're actually talking about it next month. Our next webinar is on building a CX team for success. And I was interviewing you as part of that process. For all the listeners in there, I lost power partway into our interview. So it was a little awkward, but Shaughn stayed with me while I figured out how to connect with my phone and get back on it. But in that interview, you mentioned that there are 3 members of your CX team, talked about here as well. And so what I know from those interviews, as well as just my experience, is that there is way more to do than you can ever get done. With 3 people on your team, you could probably have 10 people on your team and keep them full. So let's start that beginning part and say, why did you and your team elect to focus so much on dashboarding when there are a million other things you could do?
Well, we found it was the best way to represent the data, and the dashboards themselves allowed us to then be able to filter, to highlight, to create these calls to actions for people, because we created this. Now, it started out as being called a health score, which we kind of backed away from that because it started to get people thinking, this is a bit of a report card on how I'm doing with the customer. So we landed on kind of this behavior index, and it's really to create these insights that the data is all over the place within the system. There wasn't this central place for them to see it. So we wanted to kind of narrow it down. It's something that's actually calculated nightly. It's refreshed, and it summarizes these key items that then sales can then have their dashboard set up to say, okay, I want to focus on customers that are paying X number of dollars a year to us, and kind of what are the indicators from that side. Our index itself really has 3 foundational things. There's adoption, and that's where we're looking at, are our customers taking training? Are they consuming credits? Because one of our products is a credit-based system. It's a SaaS solution. Or are they taking our free e-learning courses? So that's the adoption side. Then we looked at the sentiment. That's the annual survey. So we pull in all the standard PSAT, CSAT, ease of doing business. We have a commitment to success question that we ask them how committed we are. And then the NPS score. That gets us our sentiment score. And then finally, the engagement component. That's where it's seeing what our customers are doing that Are they attending our events, our webinars? Are they contacting support? Do they belong to some certain programs? Are they getting services from us? So we set up kind of these goalposts for what we looked at to say, what was this kind of, what's a normal customer doing right now to establish this kind of negative, neutral, positive. And the way we've been presenting this is, let's learn from the positives, what they're doing, why they're doing it, so then we can attack or address the negatives to try and ensure that our customers are engaged, they are renewing from that front. Like it's been a bit of a journey so far for us, in the fact that we've never looked at this lens before. Everyone on the dashboards was red, and it's like, don't worry, it's because we haven't looked at it this way. Let's kind of continue to move the needle here, and we're looking at the trends as we move forward with this from that front.
So how many emails did you get the day after the dashboard was read?
There were a lot of apprehensive people because I launched it at the kickoff meeting and kind of showed it, and then people were talking to me on the side, and it was kind of they were a little overwhelmed that they were in trouble or something like that. But it's no, like it's creating this ability for them to have this single lens that allows them to better manage and engage with the customers, because we have a recurring, people renew with us, so it's trying to engage with them to make sure that they're adopting our software and they're getting the value that they're basically paying.
Okay, and I didn't ask you this before, but it just came to mind as you're asking this. I mentioned the 5 different types of data. One is this descriptive data, and I imagine often when I see that in dashboards, that's not necessarily on the dashboard, but is used to filter the dashboard. Can you get down to? Can you organize yours by individual customer, by region, by type of customer? What filters do you have?
So we basically, the behavior index is calculated on each customer that is current with us. So that is, there is a lens to see that customer and all of the components. Then on the dashboards, we have by region, because that's the way we are set up. We also have the ability to look at it by industry, because we cover many different industries. It's surprising. We're probably one of the largest companies globally that nobody knows about because we're in behind the scenes. And then we also have the actual dollar amount, that the recurring amount. So we've summarized that down into one place that we know exactly annually how much a customer is paying us. And then the final filter on the dashboard is for an individual to select, I want to see my accounts. So it basically then they get a dashboard of just their accounts, that we've set this up that when they engage with the behavior index, they put in their comments as part of the index, and the dashboard is designed to look, has there been comments within the last 6 months, and it will actually remove it from their actionable dashboard. So their day-to-day operational dashboard allows them to manage their kind of dial to kind of get down as they chip away to get fewer and fewer.
Okay. So let's go a little bit more into the design side. What decisions were you trying to help people to make? And then how did the data fit into that? You've talked a lot about the data, but talk about what were the decisions you're trying to drive?
Well, some of the factor was our access to the data itself. So again, you have your financial data in the ERP system. We have consumption or usage data that may be an Esri system, which we have some access to. And then we have our day-to-day CRM kind of operational type things, sales engagement, services, all of those kind of components. So it really came down to trying to figure out, of these, what for our first kind of phase here, what do we have easy access to? So we found that some of the financial data was actually being presented into the Salesforce system to allow sales. So we tapped into that kind of funnel. We found data that was coming from Esri that was also in Salesforce, and then we started to pull those things together. And then it was, okay, let's create a master list and see what is average consumption for all these metrics. And then from there, it kind of got into modeling it out to say, what are the goalposts here, kind of for the positive and negative. And part of our proof of concept was we went out to our regional sales directors and said, okay, give us 5 customers that you think are 5 that are positive, 5 that are neutral, 5 negative. And we stuck it in this manual calculator that we built, presented it back to them, and there was a lot of ahas going on because they have very positive relationships with our customers. We get very great feedback from our customers. They love us. They love our products. Sometimes we make it hard to do business with them, but they're very positive, and they had great relationships with them. But when we looked at what the customers were doing, they weren't modeling the behaviors that we wanted them to model. So they were quite surprised that, oh, well, we got to get some people engaged with them, because it's kind of weird that they're not taking training, or they're not basically calling support, or kind of all of the different metrics from that side. Like, I don't know if that answered your question or not.
It does, really. So you're trying to build overall engagement with the client, presumably with the belief that if they're not engaged with you overall, they're probably more at risk.
Yes, and it allows the salesperson to have a conversation with the customer that is factual in the fact of, like, knowing they're not taking training and trying to find out, or trying to figure out why they're not using this certain product, or like it allows for a dialogue to kind of happen and a potential action plan to kind of move forward from that, because we have a large product. There is a lot of different components, and there's a lot of change that goes on, and sometimes it's hard for customers to keep up with kind of the amount of change that's happening. So that's where it creates that kind of icebreaker, kind of conversational type thing that a salesperson may be able to leverage when engaging with the customers.
Okay. We'll hit technology in a minute here, but one question is, you mentioned the sales team. Was that your primary audience, or were there other audiences you're trying to do it as well?
I would say the sales team is the primary focus of us to enable them, but we've also designed it and have engaged with our industry managers, our business development people, because now that it is a object per customer with all the data in Salesforce, it allows them to build their own reports or dashboards. So we're not exclusively the dashboard report builder kind of group. We've created this foundational data for anyone in the organization to take advantage of. So whether it's a industry that wants to see for customers in that industry how engaged they are, whether it is our training department to see what customers are taking training. Do we need to do campaigns? Do we need to create awareness? Do we need to do that? So it really spans pretty much the whole organization. And the way we built it was, let's get a foundational thing that allows anyone. We're pretty open in allowing people to create their own reports and dashboards that they can kind of tailor their own, because people have a lot of dashboards. So it's kind of, and some people will gravitate towards, well, we'll pick this thing off this dashboard and this thing off that dashboard, make my own dashboard. So it really enabled them to get it into how they wanted to consume the data. So we were the provider of the insights, and we created our first dashboard to give kind of this adoption side. But I don't envision us doing a lot more kind of until we get to our next phase and we're starting to add things. Not like a lot more of these types of dashboards right now.
Okay. And just to clarify, a common SaaS model is have sales only bringing in new business and have a customer success manager and an account manager post-sale. Sounds like your sales team goes both pre and post-sale.
Yes. So we basically have, from a sales perspective, we have inside salespeople that are, and they tend to be more the smaller accounts. And then we have what we call account managers, that they range from, like, they're wearing technical account management, customer success, as well as kind of account exec, in the fact that they're trying to kind of expand. So our sales people are somewhat unique because of our size. You have to wear kind of a couple hats. So this is just another tool in their toolbox. We are just starting down the path of looking at customer success managers, but we're just starting to formalize that right now.
Okay. Well, let's turn to technology for a minute. Let's start with the display. So what tool are you using to display your dashboards?
So we are using Salesforce, the basic out of the box Salesforce. There's not a lot of bells and whistles to it. But that was just because we wanted something basic to start. So because the majority of the organization is in Salesforce, we have the ability, that's where they are right now. So we made the conscious decision to not look at a externals, whether it be Power BI. We also have the SAP Analytics Cloud, which is another component. We didn't want them having to go somewhere else. We
Right.
wanted to kind of get them comfortable with what we were doing first. So we made the conscious decision to be in Salesforce where they were. And then our longer term plan is to look into getting into more of the analytics type engines that then allow us to do deeper dives as we are doing more metrics and trying to do cross collaboration, as well as starting to tie in a bit of our own product, which has a dashboard component that then brings in that geospatial, where you can look at demographics, you can look at location, to see if scores and training, consumption, all those kinds of things. We have a long list of phase two, phase three, phase four type items that we want to get to. But we started off with just the basic Salesforce one.
And it sounds like when you did your initial audit of the data you'd want to have, you found that much of it was in Salesforce too. So that must have made it much easier to choose Salesforce as the platform.
Well, that was the driving factor in the ones that we selected. We had a list of 75 different things we wanted to. When we first looked at industry best practice, we looked at what some of the other distributors were doing, as well as Esri, but a lot of them are kind of, you get into this dilemma that you're kind of trying to boil the ocean, and the fact that you're creating something too big that you're never going to get adoption or get it rolled out. So we decided we do that with a lot of our CX programs. We start with this kind of, we crawl, we get something base that's solid, that's usable, and then we build on top of that. So a very agile type kind of approach to the way we do things.
So when we build dashboards, we start with a journey map often, and we build it, for example, a journey health dashboard or an account health board, along with other things. It sounds somewhat similar approach that we start in Excel to build out as a working prototype. We're going to build out a wireframe. We may use another tool to do the visualization, but we put it in Excel so people can see the red, the green based on data, get a sense for how it feels. Is that something you did something similar?
Yeah, well, what we did several different things to collect data. Like we went external to find the information. Internally, we had some focus groups. We did some interviews of key stakeholders, and we started to draw out that kind of visualization that you talked about. Not a full-fledged journey map, but it kind of bringing the pieces together, looking at, we always look at the customer journey and where things, what we need to measure as it goes through the customer journey, as it goes through the cycle. And our ultimate goal through the behavior index is to keep them going around the circle, that they're just basically, they're adopting more, whether we're going deeper into an organization or we're going wider into other departments in an organization. You want them kind of going around kind of the circle. So we basically kept that in mind when we identified these things. And then Excel was the thing. So we would run our reports in Salesforce to get the raw data. We would then put that into an Excel spreadsheet, and then we had this calculator thing to kind of model it out. Because we spent a lot of time, not a lot of time, but some time in Excel saying, okay, are these the goalposts as to what is positive versus negative? And it was really trying to find what the sweet spots were for that, because you don't want it to set it too high and then everyone's negative and no one's ever going to be able to be above the level we want. And that's where we really stress that neutral is okay. Neutral is okay. It's the ones that are negative are the ones that we really want to focus on.
We target the dashboard as basically a C level.
Yeah.
And so the average, so you're looking for not good, not great. So there's room to go up and down. And then the other thing we have to do is tune it over time to see, because you may have pulled the data in an up or down time, and you might be setting in inappropriate expectations. Did you find you had to tune it as well?
Yeah, we found that we had to tune. So we do have a C-level dashboard that is everything kind of rolled up together, but we've really focused on more the operational side because those are the indicators that then the actions that the sales team are doing impact the C-level dashboard. So we've really been focused our adoption on ensuring that the sales team, whoever are using those dashboards to manage, engage, to kind of change, to move the needle. If they do their things, the C-level dashboard, the dials are going to move and kind of improve from that side. So it's kind of a, a two-level approach. We created the awareness at the C-level to show what the advantages were of what we were doing, and we've now got the line in the sand, and we're watching it kind of move. And then, but we're really working with the sales team and people who are engaging it with more than the C-level side. See, we're lucky that our C-level, like we've always been a customer focused company. So there hasn't been a lot of hoops to have to jump through to sell the concept of having CX, formalizing it, because we've always been very closely engaged with our customers. We have a very positive relationship. We have a very high renewal rate, and that's where you could say, do we really need a CX program? Because our customers just they stay with us. They're very positive with us, but again, across time, your customer demographics change. So we need to make sure that we're staying ahead of the curve and seeing where there are potential gaps that we need to quickly take a look at from a CX perspective to evolve our kind of our programs. Because some of our not some of our a lot of our users, they go to school to learn GIS. They use the software, they learn it. These are professionals that know, so they know, and it's about the product itself. As our product has evolved to become more user friendly to the non GIS person, those people have a different expectation from customer support, from engagement, and that kind of stuff. So we have to evolve and make sure that we're moving forward, that we're giving that kind of high touch feel digitally, and less of the high touch personally, which we have traditionally provided.
And just for our listeners out there, Shaughn knows this. My wife actually has a master's in geography, and I don't think you know this. We get the Esri magazine every month.
Yeah.
There, so it's enjoying seeing the growth of Esri. I had a question here from Sandeep, which is a really good one. It's one actually I get a lot as well when I talk about dashboards. A little background. You've probably seen these, Shaughn, where dashboards of 50 different metrics on it, and you look at it, you just go, I have no idea what to look at. There's just so much here, I'm overwhelmed. And so storytelling is a really critical skill with dashboarding. How do you define those stories in your dashboard? How do you decide, how do you build your dashboard to be one where people can get a story out of it right away?
Well, it's like, again, it's a bit of a modeling exercise to figure out what are the key components, kind of the drivers. Now, with the Salesforce out of the box dashboards, you're limited to 16 components. So we don't have hundreds. We have 16 is the most we can have. So it's really trying to figure out, and that's where we have a few high level metrics to show the C-level. The operational one, though, is more targeted towards the calls to action that we want them to kind of pay attention to. So it's specifically looking at not all 13 of those things, but the key ones. We have dials for that then they can just basically click on the dashboard. It takes them to the report. They look at the object, and then in the object that we've defined that has the whole score, like the index for the customer, there's calls to action. There's a cheat sheet for them that basically allows them how to engage. So we've really focused more on the operational usage as opposed to the management usage and modeling our kind of dashboard from that side. Did that answer?
Yeah, it helps. And in fact, we had a question from Susan, which are, you talked about the positives. What are the efforts you have around sustaining the positive rather than just focusing on the negative?
So what we do is we try and highlight that through potentially our CX program and highlight customer engagement, highlight those components, and we learn from them that when we do our annual survey and we basically respond back out after the survey with results, we will highlight some of the things that other customers are doing, not necessarily mentioning the customer, but it's highlighting kind of some tips to say, okay, you say that we don't have a lot of training, for example. Like, are you aware of the Esri Academy? A lot of customers use this. It's free. Like, they're short. There can be short ones, long ones. Is kind of your choice. So, like, I know that's a basic example, but we do look at that, and we're really stressing though, because the salespeople are engaging the customers. It's more them understanding their customers and learning from them to kind of, and for us, we've formally launched this basically, like we started it out in the system last fall, formally launched with sales at the beginning of this year. We had a pilot that we did, and now it's just starting to collect those pieces that we can share kind of across the organization itself. That's the one piece in our next journey, is trying to share lessons learned and highlight some of that stuff.
Okay. You mentioned the survey goes live. Do you use any sort of text analytics, things like that, to get into the dashboard? Is that a manual process you're manually feeding in? Do open ends have a role?
Yes. Well, for us, that's handled more directly in the actual under the VOC program, less in the behavior index. So we do sentiment and text like analysis. Those are things that help drive our responses back out to our customers and understanding our patterns and establishing our plan for how we address those. And those types of things, then they will drive the outputs from the VOC program, drive into our master list of kind of CX projects, programs, things we want to do, that then we have another team that is a CX council that assesses that list to decide, okay, what's next? What are the things that we want to do from that front? That's a whole nother session.
A different webinar for that one.
Yes.
All right. I love this question from Garrett, which is, how do emotions play into the adoption, sentiment, engagement measure points? Are you able to incorporate them at all?
So the sentiment score that's part of the behavior index is taking what the responses are to the ranking questions, if I understand this question correctly. So we're looking at the satisfaction, like the overall customer satisfaction. We look at product satisfaction. We look at the are we easy to do business with question. Again, it's a ranking question. Our commitment to success, and then the NPS. So we take all those, and they are established weightings within our formula. And sentiment is a bit of a challenge for the behavior index because you don't hear from all of your customers. Mm-hmm. So we had to factor that into our behavior index. We only hear from doing our annual surveys about 20% of our customer base. So we had to factor that in, because you could say, well, if it has too much weight, then everyone is always going to be negative because they're not filling out surveys. And it's like, well, they have other means to customers that we can measure. And that was also one of the other driving factors behind the index was, are they engaging with us? Yes, they haven't given us any feedback, but are they taking training? Are they calling support? Are they doing all the things that we want them to do? So it kind of balances out from that side. That's where you can get in a challenge, is just looking at the VOC side of life and kind of the sentiment.
And that's one of the things I love about the data, is because at 20% response rate, that's actually a really good response rate, particularly for B2B. But yet that means 80% of customers are not represented. So by I assuming, I don't think you said it, but what we find a lot of our clients do is you look at what the 20% said to you, and then you look at the data regarding those to help figure out what matters, and then you apply that to the rest of your population. Is that close?
Yes, yes, yes.
And I believe Garrett's probably referring to, in my book, I talk about how change makers measure confidence, for example, or trust. I don't believe that is part of your approach. Is that correct?
Not at this point right now. So some of those things, and where I would, and I haven't read your book yet. Sorry, I don't want to say it's kind of, the whole idea of this kind of confidence and those kind of components, we got to figure out how to tie that in, and how we can kind of, what are the metrics that are going to tell us we want to get more on the financial side. Definitely. To kind of, right now, we're just looking at one number, and that's the overall renewal kind of amount. It's not counting services, it's not counting training or all of the other components. It's very limited from that side. We also want to tie in kind of our potential churn and kind of those different kind of components. Those are all things, again, with this kind of approach we have. There were a ton of things that we wanted to do, but we limited it down. So I don't know if that particularly answers to what the topic in your book is, but
I will send you a copy after we're done. We'll put it in your display back there.
yeah.
All right. Question from Greg. He said, I heard that you say that sales is your top persona. Does your dashboard provide any value or insights to the product managers of your digital engagement platforms, such as Esri.com, Community, Blog, Docs, My Esri? Clearly, Greg's familiar with Esri.
We basically, we supply some of our information back to Esri, and it more tends to be, we look at that separate from the behavior index. That is data that we look at, like the adoption and consumption of some of the things that we've built from a CX program perspective to make sure that they're being used. And we align somewhat framework wise with Esri. We're in the same kind of ecosystem from a web page side. It's just we have our own kind of corner there. That is the Canadian one, and we put our own stuff up there if we so choose. But a lot of times we tie back into what they've already built. That's the beauty of kind of the setup, is we don't have to recreate everything. If Esri has already created it, we tap into them. So that's where we kind of have this kind of gap, because we sometimes don't have visibility to kind of what's going on. Esri doesn't necessarily share that with us, and it's not because they can't. It's just there's a lot of stuff that could be shared, and it's prioritizing what things are more important to be coming back to us. So we're working closely with them as we add more things to our behavior index. We are working out how we then establish the actual B2B side of life, that data is being fed back to us, so then we can then feed it into our system from that side.
Okay. Now, Shaughn, I had to almost twist your arm to get you to do this webinar, because you feel like you're, even though I feel like you're way ahead of the curve, and actually I'm confident you're way ahead of the curve from my conversation with CX leaders, you still feel like you're a beginner at the dashboarding thing.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
in your mind, what does good look like?
Well, I think if you ask people who work with me, that's probably not the right the question to ask me, because I'm never satisfied as to whereabouts I am. And again, we like, and my team is always looking forward. So there are a lot more things that we want to do, and it's really, it was a challenge just going with 13, because like metrics to kind of start off, there are a lot more that we would like to do itself. And that's where I was very surprised, Jim, when you asked, because I feel that, and again, we're just using basic Salesforce dashboards. To me, we're getting the basic information together. We've enabled sales, which I think that's a big win, but there's so much more. It's kind of like an iceberg, right? That, like, it's kind of, we're kind of that bit kind of above the water, that we've shown the bit above the water. There's a lot under the water that could be done to take this further. And I see some other organizations and some of the stuff they've done and I'm just blown away. And that's where you start to get into needing data scientists and all kinds of wonderful things. But it's trying to find what that sweet spot is. So it's just, we'll keep moving this forward. We have, our plans are normally every 6 months or so is when we start to look at what is the next kind of thing. So we're now starting to identify what are the components we want to do in our phase 2, and then so on and so forth as we kind of move forward.
Okay. And I want to just really promote something you said there, which is that you said I only had 13 metrics, but the easy thing to do in a dashboard, you have a technical limit prevents this, is to throw 30 or 40 or 50 metrics out there so that everybody can find what they want. Of course, the outcome from that is that nobody can find what they want. You talk about boiling the ocean. One of our approaches, we often build ours off a journey. And so what we do is we have, for example, 4 phases of the journey. We'll do 3 to 5 pieces of data per phase, and then an overall health as well. And so we may not have, for example, behavioral data in every phase of the journey, or maybe not operational. Financial tends to go more at the overall, but to be able to build a small piece of data that tells the most important piece of the story, it's far better to leave out data that might be interesting than it is to put it in hoping it's interesting. So really encourage people looking at this to remove all that you can and no more. That saying, make everything as simple as possible, but not simpler. That's our approach. And so I spend a lot of time, we look at our dashboards saying, do we need this data? Do we actually have to have that data? What can we remove? Same with our journey map approach. We find that the more we remove, the more valuable it becomes. And so that'd be my advice on that.
Yep.
All right. I'm going to turn it over to Janita now to facilitate the rest of the Q&A. So welcome back, Janita.
Hello. I have a couple of questions that are outside of the grain, and maybe you can help answer them clarity for myself. But you talked a little bit about there's a C-suite visions and versus the sales team that has different pieces and components in the dashboard. How do you use this in a change management perspective or a governance perspective of leading initiatives forward? How do you use this dashboard in that capacity?
Well, it truly ties it, like the C-suite level is more just, it's somewhat it's looking in the rearview mirror. The stuff that's there is how well we've done. The operational side is more trying to create and identify and create the insights for people to engage actions, to create action for them that is going to influence that kind of C-level side. So I see them somewhat separate. The operational dashboard is just a day-to-day thing. It's not. It's more or less to, hopefully we built it that it allows them to manage their day, and it allows them to see progress, to see wins, that they're doing what we're asking them to do, that ultimately translates up to the C level from that side. That makes sense?
Yes. Mike mentioned here if the dashboard has any predictive capabilities. So, for example, any operational metrics that impact sentiment, which in turn affects financial outcomes. I think you talked a little high level, but maybe diving more in there.
We're not at that point yet. We're kind of, and that's where, going back to Jim asking me to talk, I don't think we have it fully figured out. We've kind of figured out a path to kind of start to go down, and we will adjust as we kind of go. So we've kept it pretty, I feel, basic. Jim says that we're kind of in the middle, but yeah, those are things that we want to get to. But I don't think we're going to be able to do it within Salesforce, the basic dashboards. That's when you need to get out into more a stronger analytical system that can easily bring in more data from different sources into one place.
Yeah, if I go a little deeper on that, Mike, first of all, most organizations doing predictive analytics do it about year 4 or 5. It takes a while to get there. When we do dashboarding, I describe it as descriptive analytics. It's a descriptive dashboard. It's describing what's happening now. There are usually you can see, for example, if they are not engaging in training, you can pretty much predict there's going to be an increase in sales or service calls down the road. And so there's an understandable predictability. But typically we find that first phase is around descriptive analytics. It then sets the framework to, over time, track the behaviors and build predictive. But I also agree with you, Shaughn, I've never seen that level done in Salesforce. It may be exported to Salesforce for delivery, but that analysis is done more in a BI tool. And again, it may be using Salesforce visualization, but that analysis is done elsewhere.
Let's go back to the beginning, because you mentioned, Shaughn, that you had a bunch of different data points and you dwindled it down to 13, those ones you had easy access to for the data. If I don't have a dashboard at all, like what are some of those factors that I should consider during the design and building a proof of concept and getting one dashboard started?
Well, it truly comes down to, can you run a simple report that lists off all the things that have occurred that have the kind of key components that can link things together: customer number, name, location, some of the basic demographic type stuff. And it just, like, we started out by, give us a list of all the customers that took training, give us a list of all the customers that took the academy, so the e-learning side, give us a list of all the customers. So it was just basically having the ability to do those lists, and then we would move them into tabs in a actual Excel spreadsheet. And then we had one master tab that basically was pulling the data in, doing the formulas kind of onto the cells to figure out for each customer what was their score. Now, we didn't do our entire customer base. As I mentioned, each region gave us 555, which gave us, we had about 90 to 100 customers that we started with to kind of model this through. So we felt that we had a good mix of hopefully positive, neutral, negative. But as it turned out, the ones they gave us, we only had one positive. Like, everything else was either neutral or negative. So it was kind of, then we started looking at the numbers, and we tweaked the numbers a little bit, but it was truly the behaviors we wanted from our customers that we have very good relationships with. They weren't doing the stuff that we wanted them to be doing. Jim's kind of going.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I was thinking about it. So, our approach towards that, finding the right data, is, again, we start with the journey often. You can see behind me a bunch of journey maps. And so what we do is we actually start with that journey to look for, that we sit down with the operations team to start looking at what are the metrics that translate to those behaviors, those impacts of the customers. And we use that for driving our dashboard. But I love your idea of taking a handful of customers and saying, are these behaviors we want? I thought you might say the opposite, which is cherry picking. Let's bring all of our best customers, and so everybody's green. I'm glad to hear you went the other way. It might be a Canadian thing. I don't know, but you're in a different direction.
Yes.
I think Sarah has an excellent reflection question here. What are one or two of the biggest learnings you had as you reflect back on your previous self-building this dashboard and your journey so far? And if you had to do it again, would you do anything differently?
Oh, how much time we have? No. Well, really, it was like I wish that we had a better catalog to start off of where our data was and how we could access it. That's something that we've learned, and now we are starting to better track and understand all the different data points, whether we have them in our system, what system, whether it's something from Esri that we need to get. Do differently. I think that we probably shouldn't call it health score to begin with, because it kind of put us in a hole, like a little bit to start off, because it just got people defensive. And then the other component is I think we did it well of having the right people we talked to. champions that are going to support this and endorse it. We didn't do it in a vacuum. We had some people that we should have included as part of that. We did miss a couple people. So we've had to go a little bit extra with those once we launched to kind of get them aligned to what we were thinking for the start. Because again, they were wanting all the stuff, and we're no, we're starting here and kind of going there.
Shaughn, thank you so much. This has been tremendous. It's everything I hope for as you walk through your journey on how to build dashboards. Now, if you out there are looking at how can I do some of this work, actually go through a lot of detail on identifying the right data in Do B2B Better, including an example from a technology company, a software as a service company, who I can't say their name, but Shaughn has said their name about 75 times on this call. So you may have an idea who that is as they work through their behavior index. And so it gives you a head start on that. But as I mentioned up top, data is one of the missing elements of most customer experience programs. The rest of the business talks in operational and behavioral plus financial data. If we talk only in surveys, we're missing a huge opportunity to influence the rest of the organization, as Shaughn has seen in his work there. I also want to reinforce what we talked about is that the fourth action of a change maker is using deliberate change management. Shaughn talked about how he involved the right people throughout the organization to make sure they had the right data, and wishes he involved a few more. Highly recommend spending time with your operations group, probably finance as well, even though it's less on the dashboards, it's still part of that, as well as your sales and other teams to really understand what are the data they're looking at. Because if you can answer their questions, that's how you build engagement with your dashboards, which is where we all want to get to. Now, I engaged this whole conversation with Shaughn because we were talking about building a CX team for success. You will see him in a video again next month as we get back together for that webinar. Lisa will have a link for you to sign up in a few minutes. We went out and we interviewed dozens of CX programs to understand how do they build their program for success. And yes, Shaughn was one of those successful organizations that we interviewed. So look for that next month. On behalf of Heart of the Customer, I'm Jim Tincher. Thank you, Janita, as well as Shaughn, for putting this together. It's an awesome chance to learn from our peers, which is what we love. Shaughn, if they want to learn more from you, can they connect with you on LinkedIn?
They sure can. I have no problem. And I also will be attending the CXPA conference in Denver. Is it the end of April?
Yes, it is. CXPA Leaders Advance down in Colorado. So, yeah, it's great sessions where I actually met Shaughn in person last year.
Yes.
Excellent. So we hope to see you all there.
Willing to share and grow CX.
Excellent. All right. Thank you all for your time today. Appreciate you being here. And we will lead out with a video telling you where you can connect for our next webinars. Thank you all and make it an awesome day.
Thank you. Bye.